Hello, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new, don't forget to like and subscribe. Today, we are looking into the possibility of multiple messiahs. If you find this content interesting and wish to help out a channel, there will be a link in the description. Now on to the subject at hand. There is a theory that prophets may have spoken of more than one Messiah. We will start in Isaiah 9 verses 6 and 7. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will be on his shoulders. He is called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. His government will expand, and peace will be endless for the throne of David and his kingdom, to establish it and to sustain it with justice and righteousness from now on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. This is the Messiah of Davidic lineage. Next we move to Isaiah 53. This passage describes a suffering servant who will be pierced for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities. He will bear our sins and make us righteous. 53 verse 1. Who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a tender plant, and like a root out of a dry ground. He had no form, and he had no majesty that we should look at him, and had no attractiveness that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by others, and a man of sorrows, and familiar with suffering, and like one from whom people hide their faces, and we despised him, and we did not value him. Surely he has borne our sufferings, and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken, and struck down by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, and he was crushed for our iniquities, and the punishment that made us whole was upon him, and by his bruises we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned, each of us, to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, as a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. From detention and judgment he was taken away, and who can even think about his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living, he was stricken for the transgression of my people. Then they made his grave with the wicked, and with rich people his tomb, although he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet the Lord was willing to crush him, and he made him suffer. Although you make his soul an offering for sin, and he will see his offspring, and he will prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will triumph in his hand. Out of the suffering of his soul he will see light, and find satisfaction. And through his knowledge his servant, the righteous one, will make many righteous, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore will I allot him a portion with the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life to death, and was numbered with the transgressors, yet he bore the sins of many, and made intercession for their transgressions. Isaiah 53 tells us of a suffering servant who will be killed. This Messiah will bear the sins of everyone, and through his suffering and blood will we be saved. This is a stark difference from the other Messiah who will rule with justice and righteousness, and his reign will be everlasting. Yes, there are several ways to interpret this, however. It seems pretty clear that there is a difference between these two Messiahs. Some people believe that these three passages refer to three different people, the first to the Messiah who will come to rule, the second to the Messiah who will come to suffer, and the third to the prophet Elijah who will come to prepare the way for the first Messiah. Others believe that the first two passages refer to the same person, the Messiah, who will come both to suffer and to rule. They argue that the suffering servant in Isaiah 53 is not a separate person from the messianic figure in Isaiah 9 verses 6 to 7, but rather a different aspect of the same person. They point to the fact that Isaiah 53 verses 10 to 12 says that the suffering servant will see his offspring, prolong his days, and prosper in the will of the Lord. This suggests that the suffering servant will not be destroyed in his suffering, but rather will be victorious and exalted. Could it be possible that the suffering servant would have children, and this would prolong his lineage? And that from that lineage another Messiah would be born to rule? I would think this would be the more likely scenario, as we see in the case of Yahshua or Jesus being resurrected, in which he would have the ability to see his offspring. The different descriptions of the Messiah in Isaiah. Isaiah 9 verses 6 to 7 describes the Messiah as a powerful and victorious king, while Isaiah 53 describes the Messiah as a suffering servant. These two descriptions seem to contradict each other, which has led some people to believe that they refer to two different Messiahs. The Jewish tradition of the Messiah ben David and the Messiah ben Joseph. In Jewish tradition, there is a belief in two Messiahs, the Messiah ben David, who will be a victorious king, and the Messiah ben Joseph, who will be a suffering servant. This tradition is based on the different descriptions of the Messiah in Isaiah, as well as other passages in the Hebrew Bible. There is also some evidence to support the idea that Isaiah prophesied about a prophet. In Isaiah 42 verses 1-9, God speaks about a servant who will be a light for the nations and will proclaim justice to the nations. This servant is often identified with the Messiah, but it is also possible that he is a separate figure. And Isaiah 41 verses 1-9 read as follows. 1. Be silent before me, coastlands, and let the peoples renew their strength. Let them come near, then speak together. Let us approach for a ruling. 2. Who has roused victory from the east and summoned it to his path and delivers nations before him and brings down kings, and makes their swords like dust, their bows like wind-driven chaff? 3. And he pursues them and travels on safely, by a way that his feet had not known. 4. Who has acted and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, the first, and with the last, I am he. 5. The coastlands have seen and are afraid. The ends of the earth, together, they have drawn near and come. 6. They all help their neighbor. They say to each other, take heart. 7. The carpenter encourages the smith, and the one who smooths with the hammer encourages the one who strikes the anvil. He says of the soldering, it is good, and reinforces it with nails, so that it cannot loosen. 8. But you, Israel my servant, Jacob whom I have chosen, seed of Abraham my friend. 9. You whom I encouraged at the ends of the earth and called from its corners and said to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you, and I have not rejected you. It is important to note that the doctrine of two messiahs and a prophet is not a core doctrine of Christianity. There are many Christians who do not believe in this doctrine, and who believe that the New Testament teaches that there is only one Messiah, Jesus Christ. John 1 verse 21. This passage describes John the Baptist as a prophet who came to bear witness to the light, so that all might believe through him. John 7 verses 40-52. This passage describes a division among the crowd over Jesus, some saying that he was the prophet and others saying that he was the Messiah. Acts 3 verses 19-21. This passage quotes Peter as saying that Jesus is the prophet who was raised from the dead, and that the heavens will receive him until the time comes for the restoration of all things. Some people believe that these passages support the idea that John the Baptist was the prophet who was to come before the Messiah. They also believe that the passages in John 7 verses 40-52 and Acts 3 verses 19-21 suggest that Jesus was seen as both a prophet and the Messiah. Matthew 16 verses 13-17. In this passage, Jesus asks his disciples who they think he is. Peter replies, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus then blesses Peter and says that he has built his church on this rock. This passage suggests that Jesus is the Messiah, but it does not say that he is the only Messiah. John 14 verses 16-17. In this passage, Jesus promises his disciples that he will send them the Helper, the Spirit of truth. The Spirit will teach them all things and remind them of everything Jesus has said. This passage suggests that the Spirit will play a significant role in the end times. Some Christians believe that the Helper in John 14 verses 16-17 is the Messiah ben Joseph. They argue that the Spirit will come to prepare the people for the second coming of the Messiah ben David. It is important to note that the New Testament was written by Christians who believed that Jesus was the Messiah. Therefore, it is not surprising that the New Testament would support the view that Jesus is the Messiah. However, the New Testament does not explicitly say that there are one or two Messiahs. In conclusion, there is some biblical support for the theory that Isaiah prophesied two Messiahs and a prophet, but there is no clear consensus on this issue among scholars or theologians.